How's it going?
Oh, going well, going well. I've always enjoyed listening to your show, and it's cool to be able to call in with a hand.
And I know this one's come played out of, I think, Boston Harbor Encore, right?
Yep, Encore Boston Harbor. It's 10:25.
Before you get into this, I know that it was important that you did not want to, say the name of your opponent, and we'll respect the wishes. But I asked a few people when you gave me the name of your opponent, and they didn't know who it was. So I don't know how well known this guy is, but maybe the people that I asked aren't as regular as I think that they are. But anyways, yeah, go into your background. Sorry.
This is actually my first time playing 10:25. The opponent in the hand might know this is my first time playing 10:25. He might not.
Okay.
I don't know how much that really factors into anything.
Okay.
But basically, the game, seven players. There's two players that are fairly deep, who are kind of why the game is running, and everyone else is regs.
Can I just
The
ask you a
main
quick?
villain in this.
Before you get into, I want to ask you a quick question about the setup of Encore because I don't think you're a CLP website subscriber, but I know all the website subscribers and anybody who is a New England native can pipe in the comments here. But I was very, very disappointed in the fact that Chasers, their 5-10 half no limit half PLO game has sort of moved towards all PLO now. Not that I don't like PLO, and if I was playing full time, that's probably the game that I would play the most. But I own a no limit cash game training site, and I have to play no limit, to get content and to obviously stay relevant in the industry. So when Chasers made that switch, which was maybe like 4 weeks ago, I found myself now having to go to Encore, and the day that I was playing at the most was Tuesday, and I like to go and play during the day. And from what I saw, like the 2-5 game opens at like 10 a.m. The last time I was there, they didn't even open a 5-10, and I hadn't seen a 10-25 go in a long time. Was this on a weekend night or something?
This was a couple of months ago, actually. 10:25 really hasn't been running for a while, but this
Okay.
hand has been in my mind for a while, shall we say?
Okay, so I'm not missing anything. It's just 5-10 is usually the biggest game that goes there.
Yeah, although these days it's more often straddled than not straddled, so it's kind
Oh,
of
the
5, 10,
5-10
20
with
with a 2K buy-in.
5-10-20, the 2K buy-in. Okay, at least and that's usually the game that you play in. Okay, so 10 and a quarter, seven-handed, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
So I start the hand with 5,300. I'm under the gun, and I look down at the pocket aces, the ace of spades, and the ace of hearts.
Ace of spades,
I
ace of hearts,
open,
okay. Mm-hmm.
yep, I open to 65 from under the gun.
To 65. Okay. Is that the standard open size?
In this game, there's one player who's been opening to 50. There's one player, a bunch of people are opening to 75. Some people are in the middle.
Oh
I
my
tend to
God.
like the 2.5x size,
Min raise,
especially
huh?
from early position.
The Euro min raise? I'm surprised they allow you to go to 65. Usually it's like in increments of the big blind. But okay, so you go to 65.
I go to 65. The hijack, who has a 12K stack, he's kind of recreational player. He flats.
Okay.
The button, who is a regular on the tighter side, who starts the hand with about, I think, 5,000. He calls as well. And then the main villain in the big blind defends his big blind.
So
Four-way.
big blind calls. Big blind has you covered as well?
Big blind has 8K to start the hand, has me covered.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4 ways, and you have aces. Not a big raise size, like you said, about 2.5, 2.5x. So it's like whatever, 270 or something like that with the dead money. Okay, go to the flop.
Yep, so it should be about 270 in there.
Yep.
And the flop is the jack of hearts, the deuce of clubs, and the four of diamonds.
Jack of hearts, four of diamonds, deuce of clubs, right?
Yep.
Jack of hearts, four of diamonds, deuce of clubs. So pretty disconnected.
Pretty disconnected. Pretty good flop for aces, I'd say.
Yeah, it was a pretty good flop for aces. Yeah.
So the big blind checks. I bet about third pot. I go 100. And I get a call from the hijack. The button folds. And the big blind calls. So three-way to the turn.
So we get check hero to 100. Hijack, who's next to act, calls, right? Button folds, and then the big blind overcalls. So it's like 570. And, you got to obviously be a little cognizant of the hijack because he's next to act. I mean, there's really not a draw out there. I mean, the draw, I mean, I guess it could be like a 5-6 suited for like a gut shot or something. You're blocking some of the wheel draw. So, I mean, that hijack he's really forced. We're talking about like multi-way defending theory here. When the hijack has the button behind him and also the big blind, obviously behind him, right? Big blind sort of naturally checking to you, and you are the pre-flop raiser, right? And you're c-betting 100, like, he's not even supposed to continue on here with any type of like hand for value with less than a jack, I would say. Like if I flatted with 8s or 9s here, this should not be a call with 2 people behind. I just want to point that out, that next to act call. Do you agree with that?
I agree in theory. I think this guy, he was playing like 90% of hands. I think he's going to be way over peeling in this spot.
You think he's going to be way over peeling? So that might come into play here? Possibly.
Yeah, and the big blind is going to be cognizant of the fact that the hijack is over peeling in this spot.
Yeah.
So it might slightly affect his overcall range.
Well, I mean, if I'm saying that the hijack should always have a jack here, the big blind should definitely always have a jack here from overcalling or a draw, right? I mean, I guess once in a while you can get frisky with like a hand, like a 5-4 suited with like a backdoor where you're like, well, you know, maybe sometimes like my kicker isn't going to be relevant with reverse implied odds and I've got a backdoor straight draw. And you'll see that, you know, sometimes too. But like overcalling here with like, you know, pocket 7s would be madness. Or even like ace deuce on jack 4 deuce. And you take, you know, somewhat of a small sizing sort of multi-way theory. So 570 here at the turn. I'm with you. Okay.
So the turn comes and it's the 10 of clubs, which presents a backdoor flush draw.
Okay. And it is the deuce of clubs that is the club on the flop. So it's obviously jack X of clubs is possible. Okay.
So checks to me again.
Yep.
And I opt to size up a little bit. I go kind of around 2/3. I go 400 into 570.
Okay, so you go 2/3 here into 2 people. You don't have the ace of clubs, right, in your hand, and jack X of clubs is possible. Okay.
And the hijack now folds. And now's where the hand gets interesting. The big blind now check raises to 1200.
So big blind check raises here to 1200. And, you know, what does the 10 obviously change? Really, it only really changes what I think would make sense would be like jack 10, right? If you overcall the flop with jack 10. Now, obviously he could be slow playing things like a set of 4s, a set of deuces, something like that. Should he be overcalling here with some sort of like Broadway like hand that turns clubs? And that would have to like not 3-bet pre, like king, queen of clubs, you know, something like that. I'm just looking at the possibilities of some hands that might turn clubs. He probably shouldn't, but is he wide enough because you made it so small pre that he could have like a hand like 5-3, ace-3, something like that, ace-4, you know, something like that, which is what you brought up, that maybe he overcalled a little bit on the kind of wider side. These are just hands that you are beating currently right now, right? Because you're losing to jack 10 and you're losing to 4-4 and deuce-deuce, right?
Yep, and maybe
slivers of 10-10,
a jack 4 suited,
jack 4 suited,
or jack deuce suited, but I think those are rare.
You know, slow played like jacks up that waits for the turn to raise.
Yeah, I think it's unlikely though. I think the main hands I'm losing against are exactly what you said.
Yeah. Yeah, Devin Totoro says he may have more random clubs, especially completing out of the big blind. Right, but those would have to be like at least containing some sort of straight draw. Whether it's some sort of 4x of clubs, right, that decides to overcall the flop, you know, a gut shot like 6-3, 5-3 as a straight draw, you know, something like that. Now you go 4 into 570, he raises to 12. So the pot is 970 plus 12 is 2170, and it's 800 for you to call, right?
Yeah, I think folding the turn is a bit too much.
Yeah, I tend to think that too. I mean, I'd have a hard time folding here, especially when you don't have the ace of clubs in your hand. Because in this particular situation, probably having the ace of clubs would be slightly worse because it makes it so that the opponent cannot be check raising with some sort of like turned, you know, flush draw that contains the ace of clubs, ace 4 of clubs, ace 3 of clubs, you know, something like that, right?
And then I also beat stuff like, you know, maybe an ace-5 of clubs that decided not to squeeze, or a 6-5 of clubs that
Right.
decided not to squeeze.
Right. Some sort of combo draw that contains clubs. So obviously, if you call here, where you want to fold is if a club comes, right? For the most
Yeah,
part.
club feels pretty devastating.
Yeah. And then possibly, if some sort of like wheel card came in, it can be a bit odd. Like if a 3 came in and it filled ace-5 and 5-6, and you didn't think that he would just go for gold with like 3-6 or 5-3, turning his 3 into a bluff. And the fact that a 3 comes means that there's less of a chance that he has 5-3 or 3-6. I'm talking about an offsuit 3 at the end. You might fold on that as well. And then you could even say like, once in a while, but it's a huge exploit against the right players. You play like that Crush Live Poker 5th Street Chicken where it's like, well, could I ever call here and fold on a blank if somebody puts in all the money and they're just never doing it on a bluff? That's a large live exploit. You're playing in the biggest game in the room. So that would be a large exploit. But anyways, hero calls. And now we are at 970, 2170, what? 2970? Sounds right?
Yep, 2970.
Okay. Yep.
And guess what? The river is that wheel completer. That's not a club. It's the 3 of hearts, I think.
Wow.
An offsuit 3.
Now, I don't know the answer to this question, Jay. Maybe you put this in the email, but I swear to God I didn't know the offsuit 3 was coming. Did you put it in the email? I don't know.
I did.
You did? Oh, okay. I swear to God I didn't know it was coming. Sometimes people think that like I know the results or I know the hands. I try to keep it as vague as possible. I just thought that was one of the most interesting cards that could possibly come here because of the fact that we just talked about, well, club, we can fold, but here, this one's interesting. All right, so 3 of hearts here at the end. Yep.
So there is stuff that wasn't beating me on the turn that is now beating me, right? It's rare stuff, right? It's 6-5 of clubs, it's ace-5 of clubs. And again, both of those hands are hands that can be squeezed multi-way at some frequency, from my understanding.
Sure.
And I think he would find those squeezes at some frequency. But again, those are singular combos, right? So we're talking 2 combos that are discounted by the fact that he didn't squeeze. And he does ship it in. He ships it in for 4,100.
So an overbet.
Overbet, 1.3x, right? I have 4,100 left. He rips it in.
So big blind bets. And what's the deal with this guy? 4,100.
I would say this guy has, he very, very solid fundamentally, but capable of massive exploits if he deems it appropriate. I think he is, one of the few people that will just be capable of massive bluffs in unconventional spots. And I have no idea what he thinks of me.
I don't like. I mean, my gut reaction here is to fold, and I'm going to give you a non-math answer too, just from a perspective of when you call his check raise on the turn. It's pretty clear that you have what you're representing. You have a lot of overpairs. Now you could have turned like something like ace queen of clubs, right, or ace king of clubs, or something like that. That's possible, right? But you're going to have a lot of overpairs here. And obviously, if he's capable, he might know that. But I still want to fold on the cards that are not great for me. You know what I'm saying? Like if you said like, oh, the river's an 8. Or the river's actually, what's the biggest brick in the deck? An 8 even brings in some straights. Like say the river is, well, every card's going to bring in a straight, actually, because...
a jack is kind of a brick.
Right, I'm talking about every non-pairing card, excuse me. Every non-pairing card is going to bring in a straight. But I do think that the 3 isn't the best card, as like I said, because of the way that it interacts with the low part of the flop. I think the key here, and we've sort of broken it down, is what is the flop? You get into some really, really sort of deep hand reading here, and this is how you get good at hand reading, because you're going to go back street to street, and you got to look at the flop, and it's like, what connects with this board in the form of straight draws? We talked about that, 5-6, maybe some ace-5. But then if he's peeling also just a little bit liberally with, like, you'd probably rather want to peel with some cards that have some backdoor straightening possibility and connect with the bottom part of the board. Like personally, I would rather peel with 5-4 on Jack 4 deuce than with like Queen 4 suited or King 5 suited, if you follow what I mean, right?
Yeah, because you got the backdoor potential.
Yeah, well, not only the backdoor potential, but like usually like your kicker when you make 2-pair, you're a lot more confident that that 2-pair is good when a lot of money goes in, right? So you know, I just think that the 3 is going to interact overall more with the sort of clump of hands that he gets here with, as opposed to if it was like a 7, an 8, or a 9. You know what I mean? Something like that at the end that was offsuit. So I kind of want to fold here. You know, and again, it's because it would be some overcall here for him to have those Broadway backdoor club draws, which is what you want him to have here, right? Like you want him to have like, you know, King Queen of clubs or something like that didn't 3-bet, or, you know, Queen 9 of clubs. It's interesting because we talked about how, you know, it's worse for you on the turn, the fact that you don't have the ace of clubs. But when we get to the river here, like if you had kings with the king of clubs, it might be even worse for you, right? Because that's sort of the hand that you want. You want to unblock that hand, you know?
And in my mind, I was kind of like, okay, let me think about, I'm going to have a lot of overpairs here. I'm going to have some ace jack here. Queens and kings are worse than aces because they block the bluff I want him to have.
Right.
Aces is a better call than kings or queens, but ace jack is probably the best call of all of them because that blocks, you know, a bunch of
the jacks up hands. The jacks up hands that you were talking about.
Exactly. Like I block a significant amount of Jack 10 if I have ace jack versus aces doesn't do that.
Right.
But fundamentally, it was just so hard for me to find bluffs for him that were reasonable given the flop overcall. And with the 3 completing some of those hands, like ace 5 of clubs, 6-5 of clubs, I ultimately decided to fold.
I like your logic. I think it's pretty sound. I mean, we kind of talked through that anyways before we knew what was coming, right? As it goes street to street. But I think really the key setup here is the flop overcall. If you really want to, if you want to pick on some specific point of this hand for hand rating, it is the texture of the flop and the flop overcall. Really is what it is, and sort of the setup of what that flop and how those cards interact. Did you ever find out what he had?
Never did.
Couldn't buy him a drink or something. Here, never fallen. Never knows.
He offered to sell it to me for $100, but I wasn't willing to pay $100.
Wow. $100. I don't know what the largest amount that I've ever paid to see a hand might be in a given situation. Sometimes, you know, it's funny. So there was an app. It's actually related to WPT Global because it's out of China. People that have been with me for a long time. You know, way back when we were talking about the PKC days. I don't know if they still do this, but you had the option online to actually pay to see the person's hand. And the more you did it, the higher the cost it was. It was kind of like one of these add-on types of things. Like you could pay to like rabbit hunt, but you could actually pay to see your opponent's hand. It wasn't an option for him. It was just a feature of the game. I don't know the most amount that I've actually ever paid to see somebody's hand, but that might be one of the spots that I might do it. I don't know how much. What if he had said 50 though?
I might have done it for 50. Yeah. I might have done it for 50. 100 was a bit too much.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Tom Fold 5 says they still have that. Oh, interesting. All right, Jay, appreciate the call. Thank you very much.